this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to
Something Else.
Something Else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 214 of Something Else. Feast your hair holes on this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action number 56 from July 30th, 2003. My name is Aria, and joining me, as always, is the one, the only, it's Cindy. Cindy, how the hell you doing today?
I am doing well. By the way, I want to ask you this. How were those Impact tapings that you went to over the past few days?
I enjoyed them, at Kingston, Rhode Island, at the URI. I can't remember the name of the goddamn arena now. By the way, middle of fucking nowhere. It's insane that I'm like going through the backwoods of Rhode Island to get to this goddamn arena. And I'm shocked I didn't crash into a giant tree somewhere or something. Anyway, they ended up between the two nights taping a month of TV. So I will not be on any of it because I was not in a spot that they are ever going to show on television, especially the second night because like there was nobody anywhere near me. So apparently either nobody bought tickets in that area or the people who bought the tickets moved or didn't bother to show up. So actually that's a lie. That's a lie. I did have a I did have somebody who couldn't even be correctly racist sitting behind me on Friday night. At, at one point, oh my God, I don't even remember who it was, but there was a match between a Hispanic woman and a white woman that they were saying all sorts of um it was Chinese. It was a bunch of Chinese impressions during this match between the Hispanic woman and the white woman. And then during I want to say it was when Tasha Steelz was out, who is Puerto Rican, they got close, I guess, because they started making Mexican references. So at the very least, we're in the right part of the hemisphere for their racist comments about Tasha Steelz.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of a bad week for racists who enjoy sports because Bubba Wallace won this week in NASCAR.
I thought you were talking about Hogan. Anything you want to say about Hogan?
No.
Okay, great. So Bubba Wallace won, I guess.
Yep.
Good for him, question mark?
He had been on a 100 race losing streak, and people simply hate Bubba Wallace because he's black.
I mean, there's 43 people who race every week. 42 of them are going to lose. I'm sure, he's not the only person with a 100 race losing streak.
Yeah, Casey Kane's got a 102 race losing streak.
There you go. It can't be that bad if Casey Kane's got a worse streak. Well, anywho, we go from awkwardly talking about NASCAR to awkwardly talking about TNA. And the news this week, as we talked about a few times, TNA is actively searching for a national cable TV deal. And they have realized this week that there are no national TV channels out there willing to put pro wrestling on right now, or at least decent national cable networks. I'm sure there's the, one you can find on channel 407 on your cable dial that nobody ever watches or has heard of. But nobody who is going to really bring any sort of national coverage is looking to add wrestling right now. However, they are going to expand their syndicated network this fall, and so Explosion is going to be on more TV stations. Also, TNA is working on a World Cup X Division tournament. It's in the preliminary stages. They want to do a U.S. bracket and an international bracket, and are thinking that if they book both Teddy Hart and Harry Smith, they might be able to get Bret Hart to make an appearance. Spoiler alert, Bret Hart does not make an appearance.
And I don't think Harry Smith makes an appearance either, even though he wrestled quite a bit over here in Washington. We had a bootleg AWA promotion, and he was the champ.
Ooh. Hey, if you can't be the bootleg AWA champion, I don't know what can you be.
It was originally called AWA Pinnacle, but then it became Pinnacle Pro Wrestling, and it's been defunct for about a decade or so.
Then, and we kind of mentioned this in the past few weeks, but Just Incredible is officially gone, and New Jack really was fired for saying the F word on TV a few weeks ago when they told everyone not to curse. So, actions do have consequences. Not sure if that means that New Jack was ever supposed to be in this, was supposed to win the Hard 10 and thus be in this awful angle that we'll talk about here today. But yeah, that is why we no longer have New Jack on the show anymore.
That's sort of a bullshit way to fire him.
Well, if you tell somebody not to curse and their first thing to do is curse, you got to make an example out of people. So on to the show. The show starts with a recap of last week's AJ Styles D'Lo Brown matches. They showed Rudy Charles talking about afterwards, talking about his decision when AJ and D'Lo both came down with the title in the ladder match, why he did what he did. And then AJ and Vince Russo were talking to each other, and AJ said that he didn't want to wrestle D'Lo again, and Russo said that he wasn't. And so that leads us to the new opening of the show, which is a limo arriving and Scott Hudson running up to the limo to interview AJ Styles as he, Trinity, and Sonny Siaki all got out of the limo. AJ told him that they have an official company line. No comment. Siaki then said there was a documentary being made about him. Hudson said it wasn't just about him, it was about the entire TNA roster. But Siaki insisted that the cameraman follow him. This is the last time on this entire show that cameraman will be seen or mentioned.
And he is not mentioned next week either. So at least it was before probably a DVD that got scrapped, probably a Sonny Siaki DVD that they were thinking about making.
I mean, come on. If you can't have a Sonny Siaki DVD, what can you have? So we go to the ring for our first match. It is Elix Skipper versus Jerry Lynn. And Jerry Lynn won in about 30 seconds with a La Magistral Cradle. I gotta say, I was not expecting that. But Skipper, who's been getting pushed the last 2 weeks, he's like, no. We're not going to have that. I may be a loser, but I don't lose in 30 seconds. And he challenges Jerry Lynn to go 2 out of 3 falls. And, of course, Lynn gets back in the ring, and it is on. Now, the second fallless match did go much longer, much longer, including Skipper doing his rope rock hurricanrana, and he broke out the buckshot lariat. So I'd like to think that a young Hangman Adam Page was studying his Stan Lane and Elix Skipper tapes when he came up with that move. The referee got knocked down by Lynn's feet on a tilt-a-whirl. Skipper tried to use the scale, but Lynn drop-kicked it into his face and got the pin to win in 2 straight falls. It is always good to see Lynn in a wrestling match. I gave this a 5.0 out of 10.
I gave it a 6 out of 10. I liked it a little bit more than you did. I especially like how they kept up with Skipper's gimmick, but also to the point of not being detrimental to Jerry Lynn, because we've seen this time and time again here, where they'll keep the gimmick strong and sacrifice somebody of need. And they didn't do it this time.
As support
to Jerry Lynn,
I'm always for Jerry Lynn getting a push, but I was actually a little surprised by this. Because, again, Skipper's been getting a bit of a push lately, and now, oh well, now he's not.
I don't know where Skipper goes from here, because I know what happens. I have a good feeling what happens, and he's not around for a couple of. I know he does this X Cup, but he's not really featured until like next year.
Well,
like he's just there.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's always been the story of Elix Skipper. He's always just there. The only time he's ever really been featured is when Triple X is together, and Low-Key is injured. I don't know if he's still injured, but he just isn't on the show. And Daniels, we'll get to Daniels later on. And Skipper,
Low-Key hasn't burned that TNA bridge yet.
I mean, Skipper, he's a good athlete, he's a good wrestler, but he doesn't stand out in any way on his own. And well, it is what it is here. So Tenay and West run down the rest of the card. It's going to be Kid Cash versus Ricky Morton, X Division champion Chris Sabin versus Michael Shane. I guess they didn't really say this, but I mean, I wrote it out. Raven, Julio, and CM Punk versus Shane Douglas and the Disciples of the New Church in a Falls Count Anywhere Clockwork Orange House of Fun match. And Jeff Jarrett versus The Legend in a double pole match. And they also mentioned that Vince Russo is not here this week, which typically means that Vince Russo will be coming out in the main event. But spoiler alert, Vince Russo did not come out in the main event.
No.
And I have my theory as to why, but we'll get to that later.
And plus, this episode, he's featured on the show, but it was a pre-tape from a while ago.
Indeed. So this brought out Sonny Siaki and Trinity. Siaki said he's here because he interfered in all three of the AJ D'Lo matches last week, and if it wasn't for him, then AJ would have lost the belt. If D'Lo has a problem, then he needs to come out and do something about it.
Out came AJ Styles about Sonny Siaki. The beginning where he brags that the ladies love him, guys envy him, and he's got a massive hog.
I was just choosing to ignore that.
I mean, we had to deal with the hot shots saying they're pricks, they're proud, and they're protruding. So, and we had wrestling penises early on. I don't think it's always a thing with TNA.
So you're telling me that the company called TNA might be run by some immature douchebag.
Yes, and anyway, that's why Goldilocks is no longer here.
Yes, obviously. Anyway, AJ Styles came out and said that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are champions because they earned it. Lennox Lewis is a champion because he earned it. And AJ Styles is a champion. Styles told Siaki to know his role in Team Styles. AJ told Sonny that it's his job to carry the champ's bags and to ride his coattails. Sonny said he's Russo's right-hand man and AJ is just the Joker. So AJ slapped him and said he doesn't need Siaki or Trinity. This brought out D'Lo Brown. D'Lo told AJ he doesn't need Siaki, Trinity, or Russo. D'Lo said they both spent all week rewatching the finish of last week's match and not knowing who really won, so D'Lo challenged AJ to one final match. AJ accepted the challenge and said that this time it wouldn't be about ego, it would be about respect. And everyone knew what was about to happen, bro. They shook hands. Siaki attacked him from behind. AJ pulled Siaki off, but it's a swerve, bro. AJ joined in on the beating, outran Eric Watts, who chokeslammed Siaki, and then Watts booked AJ versus D'Lo next week for the world title in a cage match. And also because remember, the participants in the world title match are not the most important parts of the match. The most important part is that Vince Russo will be handcuffed to Eric Watts, so Vince Russo cannot interfere in a steel cage match.
Okay. I'll have to give Eric Watts credit. He does have charisma out the ass. But not quite sure where they're going with the Russo thing, though. But I do appreciate the cage match, as this will be a feud ender.
I guess we will see, because I'm still waiting for that match that I remember loving watching when I was younger. And to my knowledge, next week is their last chance to have that match.
So we get Scott Hudson in Raven's Lair, and we find out that Punk doesn't show up. I'm not sure if he's dealing with an injury or he just no-showed the event because he probably didn't want a job to New Church or Shane Douglas. Instead, Julio is there and Alexis is there, and Alexis is going to take part in this six-person Clockwork Orange House of Fun match.
Yippee-ki-yay, Melon Farmer. We'll get to my very valid complaints about that. I actually didn't think about looking for it, but I'll try to look it up here now while we're talking. But I don't know what went on with Punk. I do know that there is some grrring going on because Raven is going to do a hair versus hair match very soon, and he agreed to do it in Ring of Honor instead of TNA, and TNA is not happy about that. And obviously, because a lot of people know what happens, Raven does end up having that match in TNA, but it led to a lot of grief. Let me see here. Let me see. Okay, so apparently Punk was called to Japan early by 0-1. And so that's why he wasn't here.
All right. That makes sense.
All right.
Oh,
yes.
Now both of us could have fun with this one because fuck this next segment.
Okay, so I think I've mentioned this before, but TNA, and I think they still do, but they at least used to have a streaming channel on Pluto TV. And I used to watch that thing a lot, or at least they had it on as background noise a lot. And they would air a lot of old shit, and it was usually a lot of the good old shit. But for some fucking reason, they would constantly air this next match. So I have seen this match more than maybe any other match in TNA history, just because I can't really tell you how many TNA matches have ever really gone back to rewatch, more than a couple times. So this next match, the Sandman versus Edward Chastain with Don Callis, MBA, in his corner. Now, it's weird because last week we moved Don Callis into the, role as the management consultant, as the heel authority figure. But here he still is managing the man who still has not gotten a better fitting suit. I'm a big person. Cindy is a big person. Believe me, you can get well fitted clothing. You don't need to, buy, like, somehow he managed to have a fucking suit that's somehow 3 sizes too big for him. And this man is like, they announced it was 500 pounds, and I didn't watch him step on a scale, but I was guessing at least 450. But yeah. So honestly, I think he's in worse shape than Cheeks. If you remember Cheeks from the second episode of TNA, who got credit for breaking the ring, even though it broke on its different match. So before the match, Don Callis says that Marketing 101 is to give the fans what they want, and what they want is for Edward Chastain to have a wrestling match with the Sandman, and if Sandman doesn't, then he will be downsized. Ooh boy. So first of all, my Google Notes thing keeps changing Don Callis' last name to Callus, and it's bugging me because I got to keep fixing it. And then Callis joined the announce table and told Don West that since they're both named Don, that West has exactly 1 week to come up with a new first name, and that was the highlight of the match. The finish saw Sandman go for the Hard 10 trophy, and the referee tried pulling it away, so Sandman accidentally hit him with the trophy. He then hit Chastain with a kendo stick and pinned him with a white Russian leg sweep.
Okay.
Cindy, this was certainly a match.
Yeah, and I think I could describe both of our scores at the same time. Are you ready?
Go
0
ahead.
out of 10.
Yes. It was a perfect 0.
Perfect 0 across the board. Now, I have a question for you, an honest question about this. And I'll just say this right now. Post-match, Don Callis downsizes Chastain. He's gone. Thank God. Is this the worst wrestler that we have seen to get more than one match? And just as a preface, I am not counting guest spots, so Hermie Sadler does not count. And
look, I'd say Hermie Sadler, that was better than him.
Yeah.
How many zeros did we give Bruce? And Bruce was a better wrestler than Edward Chastain.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But by the way, Don Callis was the only part of this that I marked out for, because he gets in the ring after the match to fire Edward Chastain, and he doesn't just fire the guy. He pulls out a plastic glove, a rubber glove, to put on his hand so he could shake Edward Chastain's hand and wish him well in his future endeavors. And I wrote the good news is Callis said Chastain could use him as a reference.
I admit I popped for that.
Yes.
That is legitimately a great line.
Yes. By the way, I honestly thought this was going to be the end of the Sandman. It is not the end of the Sandman. Sandman is here until February.
And he does things.
I'm just looking at some of the people he teams with. This is some of the most random groups of randomness I've ever seen in my life. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
All right, then. Poor CM Punk. Mm-hmm. That's all I'll say about that one right now.
Yep. By the way, for anybody that cares about Edward Chastain, he goes back to NWA Wildside and Anarchy, and he basically wrestles locally there for the next 6 years.
Yay. So earlier today, Shark Boy was sad about losing his partner, so Norman Smiley cheered him up and said that he would teach Shark Boy the big wiggle, and so now they're a team. And I guess they did mention on TV last week that, Don Callis downsized New Jack, but it's like, okay, he really does have the power to do that. So if he has the power to fire New Jack and suspend Jerry Lynn for a week and apparently fire Just Incredible, why is he letting the Sandman continue to wrestle? Because he doesn't like the Sandman either.
Immunity from Dixie, I guess.
Anyway, so we go to our next match. Simon Diamond and Johnny Swinger with main event Glenn Gilberti versus Shark Boy and Norman Smiley. I wrote New Jack is suspended, we're told, for violence and bad language, which ends up being an insane suspension because Jack hasn't returned to TNA for 7 years. So I hope he learned his lesson.
Yeah.
So this was a perfect match. I'll tell you what, Simon and Swinger are bringing, some good shit to this tag team division. They are serious wrestlers. Shark Boy especially is a comedy gimmick, and Norman could be a serious wrestler, but I mean he's basically a comedy gimmick at this point too. And in the middle of the match, Shark Boy starts doing his comedy, starts doing the big wiggle, and so Simon decks him in the face. Like that's exactly what he should have done.
Yeah.
Like I'll be honest, I want you remember how they were a trio in ECW with CW Anderson? I was just thinking about
Yeah.
they need to bring in CW as a trio. But CW can't cut good promos, so that's why he's not going to be brought in, and he doesn't act like
Nope.
an ass. So Smiley gets the hot tag. He does do the big wiggle to Simon, but then gets his head kicked off, and Swinger pins Sharky with a problem solver, which later goes on to become Eminem's snapshot finisher. So after the match, they go after Borash, but AMW made the save. And I was listening to a Jim Cornette thing a while ago on YouTube, and he talked about how one day he was cutting a promo in Mid South, and he was doing the Jerry Lawler Lance Russell thing, where he was running down Jim Ross, and he thought he cut a hell of a promo. And they end it. He goes to the back, and Bill Watts says, "You're not going to be wrestling Jim Ross on the next show. Go out there and do that again." And that's what I'm sitting here thinking, because they are building up to a match that is never going to happen with Jeremy Borash and Glenn Gilberti. And they bring Borash into the ring, and AMW makes a save. James Storm, I think this may have been his first fiery babyface promo. It was not very good. He had the fire down. He didn't have the how to get it in and make it a promo kind of thing. It's like he's like talking all over himself. He's talking like this. He's talking really, really fast, and then sorry about your damn luck. Because yeah, it was the debut of the "sorry about your damn luck" catchphrase that he snuck in at the end. But this was not a great promo. He's gonna get better, folks. That's all we'll say. But
Much better quick.
Yeah, he challenges Simon and Swinger to a rawhide strap match, which is basically one of those country whipping matches where there's going to be a strap on every pole or every post, and you can use them on your opponents. I assume the titles are not on the line because they didn't say that, but I guess we'll see next week. Anyway, Simon and Swinger accepted it, and ultimately, like, it's your basic 3 or 4 minute enhancement match on TNA. I gave it a 3.0 out of 10.
I gave it a 4 out of 10. That's mainly because I'm a big fan of Norman Smiley. And I thought this match was perfectly adequate. I mean, it did what it's supposed to do. Got the big wiggle nonsense in there and put over Diamond and Swinger as a solid team. I mean, what more do you want?
So then we get an edited interview with Mike Tenay and Vince Russo. And yeah, so Russo, the head writer of the show, managed to write a segment where he got to sit here and hold the NWA title and talk about how he's the champion and how AJ's the champion because of him, and he hates Jeff Jarrett. And he talked about how he's not allowed to curse on TV anymore, which again is them playing to the fucking internet fans. And I get TNA, especially at this point, TNA basically is the internet audience, but still, it was never said on TV that you're not allowed to curse anymore, except by Don Callis, who, he doesn't really have the authority to like really say that. So the only people who know that you're not allowed to curse on TV anymore are the people who read the Wrestling Observer. And spoiler alert, it's not a huge audience. You should not be appealing exclusively to people who read the Wrestling Observer. I bitched about this a few years ago when they did that segment on AEW Dynamite where the Dark Order came out on lawnmowers and they never explained it. And then I read the Wrestling Observer a week later and I was like, oh, this happened because the Dark Order stole the Young Bucks sponsorship with Chili's on being the elite. And so they bought those lawnmowers. I'm like, I should not have to read the Wrestling Observer to know what you're talking about on your pro wrestling TV show.
Or better yet, have to watch Being the Elite. I mean, granted, okay, 5 years ago, granted, pandemic era, so people weren't doing anything. But still, it wasn't needed. Also, getting back to this promo, the bet is official. You owe me $10 because he mentioned directly about having the kids put on TV, and he hates Jeff Jarrett for doing it.
Russo said he's the reason Goldilocks isn't on TV anymore. And if Mike today didn't watch himself, he's going to go to TNA officials and say that he will pull AJ Styles from the show if they don't get rid of Mike today. Yippee. So Scott Hudson was now with Chris Sabin, who said Hail Sabin for the first time. So this is a show full of, hey, let's debut random slogans and catchphrases that become part of the TNA lore for the next decade.
Sounds good to me.
Sabin said he's the future of not only the X Division, but all of TNA, and he doesn't need to share the locker room with Kazarian. In walked Eric Watts, who made Kazarian the special referee for the match between Sabin and Shane for some strange, odd, unknown reason. And I'd like to point out that, at the TNA tapings last week, spoiler alert, Kazarian was both a commentator and a talk show host. So I guess Kazarian at this point is just a jack of all trades. If you told me that Kazarian was like setting up like the catering area too at this point, I'd believe you.
Yeah, when was the last time he actually had a match? I mean, it was probably that tag team match with it was Kazarian and I think Nick Nemeth against Elijah and Joe Hendry. No. I'm sorry, it was the triple threat between Kazarian, Ethan Page, and Joe Hendry.
Nope. Apparently, at the Pittsburgh TV tapings back on June 21st, he and Trick Williams lost to Joe Hendry and Mike Santana.
So Kazarian's probably hurt or something.
Well, he did have a match at a show called Reaper Rising in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, where he defeated someone named Sean Moore in a lumberjack match. And that is currently his last match.
Interesting.
Yes. All right. So then we get X Division champion Chris Sabin versus Michael Shane with Frankie Kazarian as special referee. Today mentioned some of the stars of today coming from the Texas Wrestling Academy, mentioning Paul London and Spanky. Notably, he didn't mention Bryan Danielson, but, whatever. Sabin...
Danielson didn't work for TNA at the time. Or actually, I think TNA is the only... I think we could call it major wrestling promotion in the U.S. that Danielson never worked for any length of time.
I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it as, a major promotion. Because, I mean, there's plenty of promotions he didn't work for. But
major promotion in the sense that it was respected and people have heard about it.
Time out. Are you telling me that people respect TNA at this point?
At some point, they respected TNA.
I'm
talking about in its totality. Not at this point in time.
Danielson's in the middle of his run where he moved to England and worked there for like 6 months to a year. in case anyone cares. Um, I may, wow, I actually, while I was looking it up, like, because as we've talked about this before, I've been going through the ROH catalog, and I did not realize this, but the last show I watched was the ROH Epic Encounter, which was the real main event was a 2 out of 3 falls match between him and Paul London, that he lost, and that is Danielson's last, might be his last American match for quite a while. Because yeah, at that point, then he goes to England, and he does some New Japan. He will be okay. He'll be back in the States come November of 2003.
Yeah, so it's
So
about 8 months or so. Also, I want to make note because it's also around this time where when does Low Key kick Dan Maff's head off?
not sure.
Because I had some Ring of Honor DVDs for a time from a mutual friend of ours, I think. I bought them off her. And
Okay.
I actually saw Xavier's title win. And the DVD that I'm talking about where Loki kicked Dan Maff's head off was actually the first Joe Punk match. Which was a pretty damn good match.
So you think? So I'm not sure where that is because according to Cage Match, they only wrestled 3 times in ROH, and none of them are on any of the shows with Joe versus Punk, unless it's not those 3 Joe versus Punk matches. Yeah,
This
because
was early this was 2003. I want to say middle of 2003.
so ROH Bitter Friends, Stiff for Enemies,
That's
August
it. That's
16,
the one.
2003. Uh, oh yeah, here's the non-title match. Samoa Joe defeats CM Punk. So before the famous 3-match series that they had.
Yep. And Gary Michael Capetta was doing backstage interviews.
Oh yeah, he's been doing that pretty much the whole time, and every time he does it, there's some wacky shenanigans.
Like I thought it'd be really cool. Why didn't Ring of Honor have him do ring announcing?
He probably didn't want to.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we talk about that to talk about Michael Shane versus Chris Sabin with Frankie Kazarian as referee for the X Division title.
So Chris Sabin broke out a bunch of moves I've never seen him do before, or if I have, I certainly don't remember them. He hit a real a Lulu of a springboard missile drop kick, and when I say that Shane took the missile drop kick and went out the opposite side of the ring, Michael Shane was closer to the corner where Sabin was than he was to anything else, and he took that and went flying out the other side of the ring.
It's a great spot.
Sabin breaks out a springboard top rope dive to the outside, which I've never seen him do before. He breaks out a springboard tornado DDT. He goes for the future shock, but Shane got out of it and almost went with a super kick. Sabin grabbed the title belt, but Kazarian grabbed it from him. Sabin shoved Kazarian and pie-faced him, so Kazarian gave him a wave of the future on the title belt. Shane made the cover and had the win, but Rudy Charles ran down and ordered Kazarian out of the ring because he, as the referee, cheated. And while that was going on, Sabin KO'd Shane with the title belt and pinned him to retain the X Division Championship. Pardon me. Now, this was a very good match. However, it would have been better without Kazarian. Because even though Kazarian, the first 98% of the match, he just called the match like a regular referee, you knew the match wasn't going to end until Kazarian got involved somehow. So all those near falls, the first 6 minutes, really meant nothing because everybody knew the match wouldn't end until Kazarian got involved. And that's, dear Vince Russo, that's the issue with doing booking like this, where every match has to have bullshit involved in it, because then nobody believes there's ever going to be a finish until bullshit happens.
Yep. And
And
I had it written here, great match, but God, a lousy finish.
And again, it's a takeoff, though. They've done this now twice with Kazarian, where he's either won the title or tried to screw Sabin out of the title, but because he cheated, the title never changed hands. And so they are telling a story here, and you would think at some point Kazarian would just be like, okay, motherfucker, I'm just going to beat your ass clean. And maybe that's what happens next week, but we'll see come next week. I gave it a 6.5 out of 10.
I gave it a 6 out of 10, so we were in the ballpark.
Jeez, I think you and I must be sick this week because we're getting pretty damn close to the same thing every episode so far, every match so far.
Well, it's because the shows have been unusually good or unusually watchable, I'll say.
Yes, this show was not as good as last week, but it's an improvement on where they've been in the past.
Yeah.
So, we're getting like 3 not bad shows in a row. I think I'm being serious when I say this. That might legitimately be the longest streak in TNA at this point.
Yeah, because usually we have maybe 1 good show, maybe 2 good shows in a row, and we shovel through shit for a month.
Usually we're lucky we get 1 good show a month. But, apparently somebody smacked some sense into Vince Russo these past few weeks. So up next, we had a skit, A Day in the Life of Mad Mikey. So basically, Mikey gets mad about everything and commits violence. At one point, he's shown having road rage, which is a very legitimate concern. Road rage is a very serious thing that, hopefully Mad Mike, I guess Mad Mikey doesn't have road rage anymore. But, hopefully that didn't end up being the end of him there. It was not the worst skit we see on this show this week.
No, and we also see him doing his best Jim Cornette impersonation.
What was the Jim Cornette impersonation?
At the fast food place.
Oh, yeah. I was too busy focusing on the Office Space impression, where he threw a monitor across the the parking lot. By the way, almost hit another fucking car that was pulling out.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Note to self: make sure your fucking parking lot is empty when you do your dumb skits. But
also
so
credit to the solid build of the early 2000 computer monitor, because he did that thing and it barely broke.
I'm gonna bet you could have plugged that thing back in and it would have worked.
Yeah.
But by the way, I'll say this: we always bitch about them not treating TNA like a big deal. They show Crash Holly with his roommates, and they were wearing TNA shirts. So hey, kudos to that.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott Hudson is now with Ricky Morton, who they are just ignoring that he was ever part of SCX. And he said that Kid Cash put down everything he spent years believing in. Morton taught Cash everything he knows, but he did not teach Cash everything that Morton knows. And so that leads us to our next match, which is Kid Cash versus Ricky Morton. By the way, I forgot to mention this earlier when we talked about the Raven promo. Raven's lair was literally the steps next to Abyss's lair that we always see. So, just saying. So anyway, last week Cash was a prick towards Morton, Larry Zbyszko, and Harley Race. So it led to this match. Sarah Lee, who was one of the other people in the ring last week, she left the ticket booth because she's the ticket lady, and she went ringside to be in Morton's corner. Now, I have watched a lot of Vince Russo booking over my lifetime. And so I was like, are they really going to fucking turn an 80-year-old woman heel for no fucking good reason? And the good news is they did not turn the 80-year-old woman heel, nor did they turn the 80-year-old man heel when Corsica Joe came out as well. But this match went way too fucking long. This is the only time you'll ever hear me say this in a Vince Russo show about two people who could work, but this match went way too fucking long. Cash missed his Van Terminator. Morton messed up a top rope hurricanrana. Abyss ran out and gave Morton the shock treatment, and Cash got the pin. 2.0 out of 10.
Yeah, it wasn't that good of a match. I'm trying to look up to see how long this thing actually went. I had
Felt
it
like
right
a good
here.
7 minutes.
6 minutes 11 seconds. So yeah.
Yeah, that was too long. They could have easily cut out 2 or 3 minutes out of that, and probably gave it to Jerry Lynn and Elix Skipper, or even Jarrett and the Legend, which has a screwy enough finish for itself.
Yeah. Like, just cut 3 minutes off of this match. Nobody would care. You could have had the same result and probably get a better reaction from us. 3 out of 10. Speaking of threes, 3 Live Crew is next up. This is actually a better segment than last week, so no, that's not high praise.
You have a very low standard for IS better, because I would. I mean, last week's was bad. This wasn't exactly good. They went to a Mexican restaurant, and BG James had diarrhea.
Well, it's how he got diarrhea is the thing. It wasn't from the food. It's because Conan sort of tricked him into drinking the salsa. And if you've had real Mexican restaurant salsa like that was, you'd be in the bathroom too.
Well, if I remember taking a crap because I drank salsa, please don't put a video camera in the bathroom with me and then air it on national television. And I'm not sure what's worse, that or the next segment. The cage dancers are back in the ring, Lollipop and April, and they once again called out Bitch Slap. Who the hell keeps letting these people have microphones? Apparently, TNA doesn't want these people fighting each other, but they keep letting them get microphones and get in the ring. Now Bitch Slap apparently has theme music. Trinity ordered them to the ring for the new worst fight in pro wrestling history. April and Lollipop spanked them with a cat o' nine tails, and it was over in like 30 seconds. Can this please be the end of this?
I think it is.
Jesus Christ. Honestly, all that build for this, there's no ending that I could not have crapped on outside of they just ignored it and never brought it up again.
I'll say this. I wanted. It was so bad it made me want one more minute of 3 Live Crew.
You mean another minute of Kid Cash versus Ricky Morton at this point?
Deal.
So then we get a Christopher Daniels video package. He'll be back next week. Okay, then.
All right, sounds good to us. You're hyping up Christopher Daniels. Perfect.
Okay. Cindy, do you remember how this angle with Bitch Slap and the Cage Dancers began?
Wasn't it with Trinity and Nurse Veronica?
Nope. It started because Tracy kept trying to wrestle men, and they informed her she wasn't allowed to wrestle men anymore, so she decided to start feuding with the Cage Dancer. The reason why I mention this is because Our next match is Raven, Julio Dinero, and Alexis Laree, who, in case you forget, is Mickie James, who, in case you forget, is a woman, and who, in case you forget, is like 5'2" and 125 pounds. And they took on Shane Douglas and the Disciples of the New Church with Jim Mitchell in a Falls Count Anywhere Clockwork Orange House of Fun match. Okay. I get that CM Punk got called away and they had to do something. I don't know why they couldn't have just done a tag team match and give us the same fucking finish. They could have done Raven and Julio versus Shane and fucking Slash. They could have done the 3-on-2 match that they threatened to earlier. But no. So Raven and Shane are fighting off in their corner. Julio and Slash are fighting off in their corner. And you know who that leaves? Primetime Brian Lee, who is 6'5", 200 and roughly 50 or 260 pounds, and Alexis Laree. And Primetime Brian Lee, in between, because like he knew how fucking stupid this was. I'm sure everybody in the fucking match knew how stupid this was. He was trying to stay away from it. He was trying to get involved with everybody else. But occasionally it's like he basically had to beat the shit out of Alexis Laree. He had to give Alexis moves. He had to kick her in the face. He had to give her a choke slam. And then he could never beat Alexis Laree. There is no amount of butting you could do to make me believe that Brian Lee could not just pin Alexis Laree. And if the point is, well, that's not the finish of the match, then Alexis should not have been in this fucking match. Like, that's the goddamn point here.
Yep.
And like Slash at one point gives her a whirly bird powerbomb. I'm like, okay, that's the finish. Nope. Then here's the best fucking part. So Shane Douglas, who's about 6 feet tall, holds Alexis Laree, who, like I said, is about 5'2", for a big boot by Brian Lee. Alexis moves, and Brian Lee boots Shane. Now, as I just mentioned, Brian Lee's trying to boot Alexis in the face. Alexis is about a foot shorter than Shane Douglas. So that must mean that Brian Lee booted Shane in the chest, right? Nope. Brian Lee booted Shane Douglas right in the face. There's literally, Alexis did not have to move for that. So the babyfaces make their comeback. Shane was on a table outside the ring, so Raven does a top rope elbow to Shane through the table when he gets dragged hair first under the ring. And then Raven just came back from under the ring and was apparently unconscious, and Shane put his arm over Raven and got the pin. This was certainly a weapons match.
Yeah.
A 3.5 out of 10 weapons match.
4 out of 10 weapons match for me. So, like I said, still close. And I think a couple of things happened behind the scenes. Maybe there's some info that we can look up, but this is the last match for Brian Lee. He is done with TNA after this.
Yep.
Which is a shame, because this incarnation of the Disciples of the New Church, Slash and Primetime Brian Lee, or Killdozer Brian Lee, it was the best incarnation of the New Church. And the incarnation that we'll have next is essentially the job version of the New Church, which is Slash and Sin, who we know as Kazarian.
I like that Kazarian was on WTV for like 2 weeks, and everyone's still like, as you know him as Kazarian. But yeah. So yeah, 3.5 out of 10. Scott Hudson is now with D'Lo Brown, who is standing behind a cage wall. D'Lo said this is not about topping the best of 3 series. This is about him leaving as the world champion. And they did the gimmick that they usually do in barbed wire matches. They did here, where D'Lo pulled out an apple and tore it to shreds by rubbing it against the cage wall, showing what he's going to do to AJ Styles next week. It's a good, effective promo. I am happy we are doing promos to build up the main event matches next week. Speaking of next week, we're going to have AJ versus D'Lo, Chris Sabin versus Frankie Kazarian, and AMW versus Simon and Swinger in the Rawhide Strap match. And I got to tell you, it's been a few weeks since people have just randomly come out during this rundown and announced their match for next week. So I guess there must have been a talking to. People can't just book their own matches, you know. My theory is Don Callis, NBA, laid down the law.
More than likely. And I get it.
Scott Hudson. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I get it.
But by the way, this also says another thing that Russo's finally fucking figuring out, because one of the complaints is that they were not announcing matches in advance, and Russo's reasoning is that they don't start writing the show until Thursday. And, well, I guess someone must have told him, hey, motherfucker, we need to announce something for these next shows. And so they did. Scott Hudson is now with AJ Styles. AJ said D'Lo's isn't going to take him to school. Vince Russo has taught him more than D'Lo Brown ever knew, and next week we'll see why AJ is the best in the business. Okay.
All right, sure.
All right. Main event time. Jeff Jarrett versus the Legend in a double pole match. So on one pole is a guitar, and on the other pole is a baseball bat. And my theory as to why Vince Russo is not here this week is because he orgasmed so hard over the thought about a double pole match that he injured himself. So there was not a lot to say about this match until the finish. Jarrett gave Legend the stroke and got the bat, but Sonny Siaki ran down. Jarrett disposed of Siaki, but Legend got the bat and thwacked Jarrett with it for a 2 count. Siaki went for the guitar, but Blackshirt security ran down and grabbed Siaki's ankle. Jarrett started hitting Siaki with the bat, and Red Shirt security ran in. Jarrett got into it with Kevin Northcutt, and eventually everyone who was not Jarrett or Legend left ringside. Jarrett gave Legend a stroke from the top rope, and actually from the middle rope, and got his guitar. Jarrett, this is where the finish got kind of fucked up here. I think Jarrett was supposed to miss the first time because Legend ducked, but like they kind of half-ass ducked and half-ass swung. And then Jarrett, I think Legend then went to the top rope to do some sort of twisting dive, and Jarrett was supposed to thwack him in the head, but the guitar didn't break. So he went to the middle rope and kind of broke it over Legend's head the third time for the pin and the win. This was a bit of a shit show here.
Yeah, it was. Is it just me, or as we are learning throughout this year or so, as we have of TNA, Jeff Jarrett really shouldn't be the main event.
No, and I mean, that's always pretty much known that, Jarrett does not need the main event, and he really only lets it go once his wife dies. Like, it's sad to say, but literally he stops putting himself in the main events when his wife dies.
And this is what, 2006?
Yeah. Well, she really starts going through her health issues in 2006, and then she dies in 2007. But yeah, I mean, at that point they had Angle and Sting, and I think he finally realized they didn't really need him anymore. And yeah, that's it.
Well, this is the first time I'm hearing about that, so that really explains the promo he cut after Bound for Glory 2006.
Yeah.
Like, where he says, well, Borash is interviewing him. He's like, where do you go from here? And he goes, home.
Yep.
And talks about his family. I didn't know that.
By the way, we talked off the air about how we think this is the halfway point of these TNA pay-per-views.
Yeah.
I went and looked up what the last TNA pay-per-view is, and man, oh man, this is a this isn't a great show either. Um, so we're not going to end on a high note when we get to that point, by the looks of it.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's just like they're focusing more on Impact than they are the weekly pay-per-views.
So I gave the match a 5.0 out of 10, even with the wacky finish. It was every Jeff Jarrett main event, just without the crowd brawling.
Exactly where I had it. But after the match is where it gets interesting.
So I guess the Legend feud is pretty much over since we just beat him. So Jarrett needs a feud with somebody else. And out runs, of all people, Christopher Daniels, who really is here this week. Daniels beat on Jarrett all over the place. He jumped off the top rope with a bat to Jarrett. He did his Arabian moonsault to Jarrett on the floor. He announces that tradition ends tonight. Before splashing Jarrett into the guardrail. And I gotta say, I did not know this feud was gonna happen, but this should be pretty good, Jarrett and Daniels.
It should be a nice little feud. We know where this is ending up, but it's a nice stopgap.
Yes. Hey, like I said, it's like, we know Jarrett's going to get the world title again. We know that, but, we need to do something with him to get him away from the world title for right now. And so we're just going to have him feud with random heels. And Legend was a good heel, a good feud. And now Daniels, I got high hopes for this feud with Daniels. And we'll see how long this goes and what, if anything, comes after that. So that brings us to the end of the show. Match quality this week, a 3.57. Overall enjoyment, 5.1 out of 10. This was not a bad show, but like we mentioned earlier, certainly not as good as last week. However, there was slightly more to enjoy this week than to not enjoy. And then future build. I know we've had 3 not bad shows in a row, but still, future build 5.0 out of 10, because even though next week sounds good, as always, anytime a show sounds good, you need to remember who is writing the show and adjust your expectations. And so that gives us an overall rating of a 4.56.
Which, in turn, is not bad.
Yes. It is the definition of something that is not bad. And, yeah. I'm just going through some of our last couple of TNA shows we're going to be talking about next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, some of it certainly looks promising, although they bring in Big Vito, so I guess Russo really is in charge next year. But yeah, some of these shows are just, oh boy. Oh boy, I'm not super looking forward to some of this. Hey, Abismo Negro finally makes it in.
Yeah. What I'm not looking forward to is Jarrett's next reign.
The one that goes the entire length of him. Oh no, that's not the one that goes the entire length of Impact. That's the one after this one. Because, spoiler, Jeff Jarrett beats AJ Styles for the belt. AJ then beats Jeff Jarrett for the belt. Then Jeff Jarrett beats AJ Styles. I'm sorry, no, Ron Killings gets a run with the title for a week. Then Jarrett wins the belt, and then he holds it for a year.
Right, because we have because that was the first King of the Mountain match.
Where it's really quite simple.
But it is.
And that's when they put up 3 screens full of rules.
Yeah. And oddly enough, it was that pay-per-view and then the first episode of Impact on FS1. Spoiler alert, they actually do get the cable deal. FS1, not a bad cable channel to be on. We talked about a couple of shows that they had on FS1, specials that they had on FS1. Look up our best damn episodes, which oddly enough are some of the most fun that we've had during this podcast because it was just part awesome wrestling and part stupid shit to crap on. It's just, it gets interesting from here. And I did make a mistake. It is not this week that is the halfway point. It is next week that's the halfway point. Because next week is episode 57, and there's 114 of these weekly pay-per-views.
The sound you just heard was me throwing something at you. All right. So
you missed by about 4,000 miles.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's TNA show. We're almost there. We're almost fucking there. Anywho, before we go, do you have anything you want to plug or anything you want to talk about?
Yeah. There's something I like to talk about. And speaking of boot, as we're getting all Canadian, I'm enjoying the CFL, Canadian Football League. It's certainly much better and well organized than whatever the hell's going on with the Rock's UFL right now.
Uh-huh.
They want to put a team in Boise in the middle of winter.
I mean, technically it's spring, but yeah.
But still, Boise doesn't get that snow sticks around till like May.
I mean, part of it too, what they need to do is they need to put teams in cities that don't have NFL teams. And that was the one thing with the XFL was, we need to put them in all the big cities. We put them in New York and DC and LA. And it's like, these are all cities that already have teams. You don't want to do that. You want to put them fine. Maybe Boise might be the weirdest fucking choice, but you want to put them somewhere where they don't already are inundated with NFL, or put them in the fucking cities with bad NFL teams. It's like something that, hey, maybe people will think the UFL Carolina team is better, but oh well.
The Rock was never good with forward thinking when it comes to business decisions.
Well, he's also not the one that made half those teams. Actually, he didn't make any of those teams. But anywho, that's going to do it for this week's show. At this point, I don't know if there's going to be a Smoky Mountain show tomorrow. There's some issues going on right now, so who knows. But anyway, if there's not, we'll talk to you next week, I'm sure, and we'll go over what's going on from here. But until then, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
Enjoy Polar Seltzer.